They told him to stay invisible. But the moment he stepped in front of the president, everything changed. Santiago didn't believe in fate. He believed in trash bags, in bleach under his nails, in wiping down the same marble stairs 100 times a week so the people in suits wouldn't slip. He believed in nodding and smiling when security guards ignored him. In making himself smaller, invisible, quiet. That morning, the sun was pale against the glass of the courthouse lobby. Santiago had been up since 4 a.m., pushing his cart across the tiled floors while most of the city still slept. He took pride in his work, not because anyone saw it, but because it was his way of leaving no trace. A spotless surface was proof that someone cared, even if the world acted like no one did. He was 19, tall but wiry, with careful eyes and a way of moving like he didn't want to disturb the air around him. His mother used to tell him, "You can't afford to make people uncomfortable, mijo. Not here." So Santiago didn't speak unless spoken to. He avoided the break room during the day, knowing someone would comment on his lunch, the way it smelled, or the way he ate with his hands. He knew the whispers. That janitor kid. Doesn't he speak English? He did. Fluently. But he'd learned silence was safer. As a Mexican teen with no papers, he lived his life at the edges. Always watching. Always wary. Every sound of sirens turned his blood cold. Every new face at the courthouse made him tense. The resentment didn't come all at once. It came in small stings. It came the day an attorney dropped her coffee and barked, "Get someone to clean this," while he was already on his knees wiping it up. She didn't say please. She didn't look at him. Just pointed and walked away. It came when a guard muttered, "Figures," as Santiago walked by with his mop. It came when another worker laughed and said, "Hey, Mexico." Missed a spot, loud enough for others to hear, no one correcting him. It came when he was waiting to clock in and someone said, "If they can clean, they can pay taxes." It came when a woman clutched her purse closer as he walked past. It came when a staffer stepped out of the restroom and waved a hand in front of his face, saying, "Phew. You people eat some strong stuff." Each word, each action felt like being told he didn't belong. That he was lucky to be allowed in the building at all. He carried it all quietly. Every insult, every shrug, every joke made in front of him like he wasn't human. He didn't tell his mother. She already worried too much. That morning, the courthouse buzzed with tension. Someone important was coming. Santiago kept his head down. He was cleaning the East Wing stairwell when he noticed a man pacing, one hand deep in his jacket. Then he heard the shout. Screams. Movement. A flash of metal. Without thinking, Santiago moved. He stepped forward. His shoulder hit the man with the gun. They crashed into the railing. The weapon clattered away. Security swarmed. The president was rushed back. Santiago lay bleeding. A graze across his side. He tried to sit up, confused. Then he heard it. No. Wait. Him. Bring him. The president was pointing. At Santiago. I want him with me. Confused voices. But orders were followed. They pulled Santiago up. He could barely stand. He ended up in a black car, next to the president. Silence. Heavy silence. The president looked at him. You stepped in front of a bullet. Santiago nodded. I just saw the gun. I didn't think. The president shook his head. Most people run. Santiago looked down. He didn't say that he never had the luxury to run. Santiago had never been in a place that quiet. He sat on the edge of a small bed in a room that wasn't his, wrapped in a blanket someone handed him earlier. The president had insisted he rest. Agents had checked him out, bandaged his side. There was no real injury, just a deep scrape and bruising. Still, They treated him like he was made of glass. It felt strange. Too strange. He looked at the tray they'd left him. A sandwich. A bottle of water. An untouched banana. Clean food on clean plates. No one shouting his name. No one barking orders. Just silence. He stared at the wall and thought of the courthouse. Thought of the woman who once called him a disease. The one who snapped her fingers and told him, "Don't touch the railings after you mop. You people leave prints." She meant germs. She meant him. Santiago had said nothing. He thought of the guard who laughed every time Santiago walked past. Still here, huh? They must be desperate. He thought of the day someone threw away his lunch in the staff fridge and left a note, "This isn't a taco truck." He wasn't angry. Not in the way people expected. He was worn. Like a rope pulled too tight, too long. All those small moments. All the muttered comments. All the turned backs. They didn't yell, but they didn't have to. They made sure Santiago knew what they thought. They didn't care that he swept their floors. That he scrubbed their toilets. That he did it all without mistakes. All they saw was his skin. His accent. His last name. And yet here he was. Wrapped in government blankets. In a room with clean sheets. With guards outside the door. Because he stepped in when no one else did. Santiago leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He stared at the floor. How fast everything had changed. The president had asked him questions, back in the kitchen. Had looked at him like he mattered. Santiago wasn't sure if it was real or temporary. But for a moment, he felt visible. Not for what he did, but for who he was. He hadn't felt that way in years. When he was 13, he tried to join a city volunteer program. They said it was open to all teens. But the moment he wrote down his full name, the woman at the desk smiled thinly and said, "We're full." He'd seen her give a form to the girl right before him. He remembered going home that night, telling his mom he must have messed up the date. She didn't believe him. But she didn't say anything. She just hugged him a little tighter than usual. He remembered every teacher who doubted him, every boss who talked slow like he couldn't understand. Every customer who tossed their trash next to his bucket and said, "That's your job, right?" And now, those same people might see his face on the news. Might hear his name. Might call him a hero. But Santiago didn't feel like one. He felt tired. Later that evening, someone knocked. A soft knock. The door opened just a little, and the president stepped in. He wasn't wearing a suit anymore. Just a sweatshirt. A jacket. He looked tired too. "You decent?" he asked. Santiago nodded. The president walked in, holding 2 cups. "They said you hadn't eaten much. Thought you might want something warm." He handed Santiago a cup. "Tea." Santiago took it, unsure. The president sat in the chair across from the bed. For a while, neither spoke. Then Santiago said, "I'm not used to this." "Used to what?" "Being looked at like I matter." The president didn't smile. Just looked down at his own cup. "I think I forget how many people feel that way." "You don't have to think about it," Santiago said quietly. "People listen when you speak. They move when you tell them to. No one questions if you belong." The president looked at him. "But I should think about it." "That's the problem." Santiago looked away. "You will forget. Everyone always does. Until the next photo. The next speech. Then they move on. We stay in the background." The president took a sip. "I don't want that to happen this time." "Then don't let it." Simple words. Heavy meaning. They ate in silence. A quiet meal. Just tea and a plate of tamales someone had brought in. Santiago didn't know who made them. But they tasted like something familiar. Like home. The president tried to ask about his family. Santiago answered only what he wanted to. He didn't share his mom's name. He didn't say where they lived. He didn't explain the constant worry of being seen, being caught, being asked for papers they didn't have. He just said, "My mom works hard. She's tired a lot. But she's proud. She raised me to help. Even when no one helps us." The president nodded. Later, as he stood to leave, he paused at the door. He looked at Santiago. Then said, almost a whisper, "Thank you." Santiago didn't respond. Just looked back. Because sometimes, you don't need to say anything. The truth is already loud enough. Outside, the guards waited. Cameras blinked from the corner of the hallway. Somewhere, the world was already spinning the story. But inside that quiet room, it wasn't about headlines. It was about a boy who had been invisible his whole life. And a man who finally saw him. Even if only for a moment. They didn't want him there. The next morning, Santiago woke up to hushed voices outside the room. Words like liability, security breach, and unauthorized passed through the thin wall. They didn't think he could hear, but he did. And he understood. When he stepped into the hallway, 3 men in dark suits turned to look at him. 2 Secret Service agents stood behind them, expressionless. "You need to come with us," one of the suited men said. "No good morning. No name. Just cold instruction." They led him to a small room down the hall. Inside, the president sat at a table, his face tired. But the moment Santiago walked in, one of the men stepped in front of him. "With respect, sir, this is not a safe or logical situation. This young man is not a vetted citizen. He should not be in this building." Santiago felt the words like a slap. Not vetted. Not safe. Not welcome. He stood there, quiet. The president looked up at the man. "He saved my life." "That may be, sir, but you're setting a precedent. This goes against protocol. Against every rule we have." Santiago watched their faces. They weren't angry. They were dismissive. Like he was a mistake that needed to be cleaned up. It wasn't new. He remembered standing in line at the DMV, waiting 3 hours just to be told he didn't have the right paperwork. He remembered being asked for a green card at a job interview, even though he already had a work permit. He remembered being called a threat when all he wanted was a job. He remembered being pulled aside by a police officer just for standing at a bus stop. He remembered being told to go back to where he came from, even though the only home he knew was a small apartment in a U.S. neighborhood that barely made the map. This room, this conversation, it was just another version of the same thing. The president stood. "Enough. He stays." The men exchanged looks, frustrated, but said nothing more. Later, Santiago found himself in a secure lounge, sitting alone. A TV in the corner showed news coverage of the incident. His name was not mentioned. Just, a young courthouse worker. Even now, they wouldn't say who he was. Because it made things complicated. Because it reminded people that the person who protected the president didn't have status. Didn't have power. Didn't even have protection. That afternoon, a staff member gave him a new shirt. Plain. Clean. But when he walked past the others in the building, they stared. Some whispered. Others looked away. He saw the judgment in their eyes. Not gratitude. Not pride. Just fear. And suspicion. To them, he wasn't a hero. He was a problem. Even the cafeteria felt cold. He sat alone with a tray of food no one had asked him if he liked. No one said hello. No one asked how he was doing. He was surrounded, but alone. Then came the twist. His mother called. It was unexpected. She rarely used the phone during work hours. But a guard handed him a secured cell. She says it's urgent. Mijo, her voice cracked the moment he said hello. Are you okay? People at work saw your picture. They said you were with the president. What's happening? Are you in trouble? Santiago felt his throat tighten. No, Mama. I'm okay. I'm safe. She was crying now. They came to the building. Government people. Asking questions. They wanted to see my ID. They said they were looking into our history. Santiago, what did you do? His heart sank. I didn't do anything wrong. I saved someone. They think we did something wrong, she whispered. They scared the other workers. My supervisor told me to take the rest of the day off. For a moment, Santiago couldn't breathe. All he had wanted was to help. To do the right thing. And now, his mother, the strongest woman he knew, was being questioned, punished, just for being his family. I'll fix it, he told her. I promise. Be careful, Mijo, she said, her voice trembling. Being good doesn't always protect people like us. The call ended. Santiago sat there, phone in his lap, eyes burning. That evening, a new agent approached him. They want to move you, the agent said. Somewhere off-site. For your safety. But Santiago could hear it in his tone. This wasn't about safety. It was about making him disappear. About cleaning up the story before it grew too big. Why? Santiago asked. The agent shrugged. It's complicated. That word again. Complicated. It always meant the same thing, you don't fit. You don't belong. He thought of his mom, who once got a hospital bill for $9,000 after being denied care. They said she didn't qualify for the discount. No explanation. Just denial. He thought of his cousin, deported after a traffic stop, even though the charges were dropped. No one called to say goodbye. He just vanished. He thought of the neighbor who lost her son to a system that labeled him violent before he turned 13. This wasn't new. It was a pattern. And now it was happening to him. When the president came to see him that night, Santiago didn't hide his frustration. They want to move me, right? Quietly. So no one sees me. So no one asks questions. The president looked uncomfortable. They think it's safer. For me or for you? The president didn't answer. Santiago stood. I'm not a threat. I'm not the problem. But the moment I stepped in, I became one. The president tried. We're trying to protect you. No, Santiago said. You're trying to protect yourselves. From the truth. From the fact that someone like me had to do what no one else did. The room was still. You say thank you. But your team wants me gone. The president sat down, slower this time. I can fix this. Then do it. Not with words. With actions. There was no anger in Santiago's voice. Just truth. The next morning, the president made a call. He told the press the full story. He named Santiago. He described what happened. He said, clearly and firmly, that the young man who had protected him deserved to be seen. Deserved to be safe. Deserved better. The backlash came fast. Not from the public. From inside. Some advisors called it reckless. A distraction. A risk. But the president didn't back down. Santiago watched the press conference from a corner room, eyes wide, heart pounding. It wasn't a full answer. But it was a start. Later, one of the same agents who had dismissed him walked over and offered a handshake. You have guts, kid. Santiago shook it, not because he needed validation. But because sometimes, making someone look you in the eye is its own kind of justice. The system was still broken. Still slow. Still filled with people who believed rules mattered more than people. But for once, the rule breaker had a name. And a voice. And the world had started to listen. Santiago stood behind the curtain, eyes fixed on the floor. The room on the other side was filled with cameras, reporters, and flashes of light. He could hear them talking, preparing their mics, waiting for the moment. The president had asked him to join him for a formal statement. He didn't want to. He didn't want to be stared at. He didn't want to be the story. But the president said, "They need to see you. Not just hear about you." Santiago had heard that before. From teachers. From people who thought being visible was enough. Like it solved something. He had been visible his whole life. Visible in the wrong ways. He was the kid security watched in stores. The one people avoided on sidewalks. The one asked, "Where are you from?" with a tone that said, "You don't belong here." Now, he was being shown to the world like a symbol. But what did symbols get? They got used. They got talked about. They rarely got helped. Still, he stepped onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The room went quiet. The president stood beside him. "This," the president said into the mic, "is Santiago Lopez. He saved my life. And for far too long, people like him have been made invisible. That ends today." Santiago didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. Later, backstage, an older man in a gray suit approached. "A judge." "Santiago," he asked. "Do you remember me?" Santiago shook his head. "5 years ago," the judge said, "you stood in front of my bench. You were 15. Picked up for trespassing in a park after dark. I gave you a warning. Told you to be more careful." Santiago blinked. It came back in flashes. A cold night. The bench where he'd sat too long. The officer who said he looked suspicious. "I didn't know your name until today," the judge said. "I judged you by your clothes. By your address. I didn't ask what you were doing. I just assumed." Santiago said nothing. "I was wrong," the judge said. For a moment, Santiago looked him in the eye. "A lot of people have been wrong." The judge nodded and walked away. Outside, the air was thick with attention. Reporters followed. People stared. Some smiled. Others looked confused. On the sidewalk, a woman reached out and touched his arm. "Thank you," she whispered. "For being brave." He nodded. As he turned the corner, a boy ran up, maybe 10 years old, brown skin and big eyes. "Are you him? Are you the one who helped the president?" Santiago hesitated. Then nodded. "My brother says you're a hero," the boy said. Santiago crouched to his level. "Tell your brother anyone can be brave. Not just people on TV." The boy smiled and ran off. That night, Santiago returned to the safe house. The guards were quiet now. Some gave small nods. The coldness had softened. A little. Inside, he found a folder waiting for him. Confidential. He opened it. It was from the Department of Homeland Security. A note clipped to the front read, "Review in progress. Temporary protections granted." His chest tightened. Temporary. Not permanent. Not guaranteed. Even now, even after all of this, they still couldn't say he belonged. He remembered his mom saying, "They let you stay, but they never stopped checking the lock." He held the paper and felt the weight of it. The fragility. One signature could erase everything. Still, it was something. Later, the president came by. Not with cameras. Just alone. You were amazing today, he said. I didn't say anything. Sometimes, that says the most. They sat down. The president looked older now. He rubbed his hands together, nervous. I want to do more. Not just for you. For everyone like you. I can push policy. I can speak out. But I need your help. Santiago looked up. Me? You see what I don't. You live what I can't. Help me change it. Santiago didn't say yes right away. He thought of every rule, every hallway, every time he was told he didn't matter. That he didn't count. But now someone was asking to listen. Not command. Not direct. Just listen. He nodded. And then, just as he thought the day was over, came a knock. An unexpected visitor. A face from his past. Someone who had once looked down on him. Someone who now needed him. What happens next will change everything again. Later that night, he opened a sketchbook his mother had sent him. She had drawn a picture of him. Not as a janitor. Not as a hero. Just her son. Standing tall. At the bottom she wrote, "No badge makes you worthy. You already are." He closed the book, looked out the window, and whispered to the city below. It's time. Because now, they knew his name. And he wasn't afraid to speak it. The knock at the door wasn't loud. It was hesitant, like whoever stood behind it wasn't sure they should be there. Santiago opened it slowly. And there she was. Miss Halprin. The courthouse manager. The woman who used to walk past him every night like he was part of the furniture. Who once asked him to clean up a spill in the lobby, then corrected his English in front of everyone. Now, she looked nervous. I wasn't sure if I should come, she said. But I needed to. Santiago stepped aside, silent. She walked in like the floor might give out beneath her. I watched your speech. I saw the president standing beside you, she said, eyes on the floor. And I realized something. Santiago didn't interrupt. I never knew your name. That hit harder than it should have. She had seen him every day for 2 years. Given him instructions. Assigned his duties. But not once had she asked his name. I want to apologize, she said. For the way I treated you. He nodded. It wasn't enough. But it was something. She left quietly. Later, Santiago sat in the quiet of the safe house kitchen, turning that moment over in his mind. It felt like a summary of his life. Not hated. Just ignored. Unseen until it became inconvenient. He remembered teachers who mispronounced his name for an entire semester. Doctors who spoke to his mother like she was a child. Customers who acted like he couldn't understand them unless they yelled. Now, everyone wanted to know his name. But where were they before? He stirred sugar into his coffee, watching the grains disappear. That was what it felt like to be him. Slowly disappearing until something made you stand out. Then suddenly, everyone noticed. But only for a moment. He went for a walk that morning. No security. Just himself. And as he passed a local school, he saw something strange. A mural. New. Painted in bold colors. A figure standing tall, holding a broom in one hand, a shield in the other. Underneath, the words. Courage doesn't need permission. He stood still. It was him. Someone had painted him. A teacher stepped outside. The kids insisted. They said they finally saw someone who looked like them doing something that mattered. Santiago nodded, throat tight. He had never wanted to be a hero. He just didn't want anyone else to feel like they didn't count. That afternoon, he met with the president again. The room was full of aides, advisors, and staff. But this time, they looked at him differently. Not with pity. Not with suspicion. With respect. I want to build something, the president said. Something that lasts. A council. A group that advises me directly on immigration, labor, and dignity. And I want you on it. Santiago looked around the room. Some nodded. Some looked unsure. But he didn't care. Only if you let me speak honestly, he said. The president smiled. That's exactly why I asked. In the weeks that followed, Santiago became more than a story. He became a voice. He visited schools. Spoke at forums. Helped design training for government staff. He even returned to the courthouse. Not to clean. To speak. Ms. Halpern introduced him. This is Mr. Santiago Lopez, she said into the mic, voice steady. He used to work here. He changed this place more than any of us ever could. The staff stood and clapped. And Santiago looked out over the rows of faces, thinking of all the days he walked past them with his head down. He stood straighter. I was invisible here for a long time, he began. But I was always watching. And what I saw wasn't hatred. It was something worse. Indifference. He let the silence settle. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to ask you to see. To see the people who keep this place running. The ones you pass every day. Because when you see someone, you protect them. You listen to them. You value them. Afterward, a young custodian approached him. I didn't think anyone like us could stand up there. Thank you. Santiago shook his hand. Anyone like us belongs everywhere. In the months that followed, Santiago and the president appeared together often. At shelters. At citizenship ceremonies. At labor rights events. And every time, Santiago spoke clearly. Calmly. With the quiet strength he had always carried. The media tried to label him. The immigrant hero. The janitor who saved a nation. But he didn't need their labels. He was his mother's son. The boy who never gave up. The man who refused to be erased. And as the seasons changed, so did the country. Not overnight. Not in sweeping waves. But in classrooms, in courtrooms, in coffee shops. People started asking names. Learning stories. Speaking less, and listening more. Santiago never asked for credit. He just kept showing up. And one night, after giving a talk at a youth center, a small girl handed him a drawing. It was him. Holding hands with a crowd of kids. Above it, in shaky handwriting, were 4 words. Thank you for seeing me. He blinked back tears. Because that was the whole point. He had spent a life trying to be seen. Now he was helping others feel the same. And maybe, just maybe, the world was finally ready to look. If Santiago's story moved you, if you've ever felt invisible, unheard, or alone, know this, your voice matters. Share this story. Subscribe. Because the world changes when ordinary people refuse to stay silent.